Good afternoon. Welcome to Zoom In. This session this month is called So Smart, and I'm really pleased to be able to welcome Kayla, our own Children and Youth Librarian Services staff member, to give us a demonstration on some of the very basic elements of sewing. Kayla's been sewing for her family and friends for over a decade, despite her youth, and she's a wonderful person, as far as I'm concerned, to have us absolute beginners get a true grip on what it means to why we should hand sew, what the benefits are to us and our wardrobes, and then some basic techniques. So welcome, Kayla. Thank you so much for joining us. And I'm going to turn things over to you.
Sounds good. Thank you. So welcome, everyone. Hopefully today we'll just take away a little bit of knowledge of how to work with a needle and thread. We're not really going to touch a sewing machine. It's just going to be hand sewing today. And it's basically just going to be if something rips or if a button pops off, those sorts of things, what can we do? Instead of having to throw out that garment, we can repurpose it and keep using it. So there are some amazing benefits of doing your own repairs and alterations. First of all, you're saving money because for all of these garments that you would normally throw out or I don't know what else you would do with them, scrap them or whatever, then you're saving yourself the money to replace that. So that's really good to do, obviously. And then it's also good for the environment because we're not filling the landfills with a perfectly good sweater that lost a button. And that's always good to do. Besides that, it's very satisfying to be able to fix your own clothes. I always feel really satisfied when I got myself on something that I worked on myself. They've also found that there are health benefits from sewing. It's stress relief once you know what you're doing. And then it improves coordination and there's mental stimulation aspects to that as well. It's also really good for creativity. So once you've learned the basics, the possibilities are endless. You could move on from here and go to like cross stitching or embroidery, or you could go on to garment making from scratch, do that sort of thing, or you could go into machine sewing and do anything with that as well. So this is kind of the starting off point. You could get interested and then who knows where you could go from here. So today there shouldn't be too much terminology. It should be pretty basic, just your needle and thread and scissors. If there's a new term, I will try to introduce it to you as we go. I don't think there should be too much. What we'll need to have, as I just said, is your needle, your thread, and your scissors for everything that we're doing today. I think for hemming, we're going to need a ruler and a white pencil crayon, but I think that's pretty much it. Oh, also for our button that we were going to replace today, you'll need a button to replace it. I always get my buttons.
Can you tell me a little bit more about what kind of scissors? What do we use? Can we use the kitchen shears? Can I use my first aid scissors? And also about the needles and how do you pick a needle? Okay.
Yes. Okay. So first of all, the scissors, yeah, you definitely want to get different scissors than what you're cutting paper with, because paper is really hard on your scissors. So usually go to a craft store and buy new scissors. They are usually called fabric scissors specifically. I don't think there's any difference. I think it's just better if someone owns paper scissors and fabric scissors because your fabric scissors need to be a lot sharper. You can also get snips. I have some of these. They're cute little scissors. I don't know, they're just a little bit nicer when you're just working with little threads. And then for the needles, you can really pick these up anywhere. Some people are fussy and they like to have really nice needles. I think I just got these at the dollar store. And for a beginner, that's all you really need. And it has different sizes depending on what you're working on. So if you're doing large thread with a knitted garment, you're going to want a big needle so that that big piece of yarn or thick thread can get through that needle. And then if you're working on something tiny with a little thread, you'll just need a little needle. Or if you're, you know, working on a little stuffed animal or something, you'll want something smaller. They also have like specialty needles. There's leather needles and jean needles and all that fun stuff, but we won't touch that today.
No.
And then for the thread, I just get, again, whatever's at Walmart or the dollar store. It's just polyester thread, or the craft store, all purpose. You can get some that's specifically called hand sewing thread. I honestly don't know what the difference is between that and machine sewing. It both seems like thread to me, but yeah, it doesn't really matter, whatever you can get your hands on. And then what you'll want to do is make sure that your thread is a very similar color to what you're working on. You don't want it to be the opposite because that'll stand out really bad. So try to get it as close. Sometimes if I'm working on like a navy and I only have black, not a big deal. You shouldn't see it too much. Yeah. And so I guess the first thing that we would want to work on today would be threading your needle. And so, yeah, we'll get, I'm trying to think of what we'll work on first. I think we're putting on a button first. So I have a tip for thread. When I first started sewing, I thought, oh, I might as well get like yards and yards of thread, and then I won't have to stop halfway through my project and get more. But I was very sorely mistaken. You don't want to have a lot of thread because every time you're going in and out, you have to pull and pull and pull all your thread through. It's not good. So what you want to do is you want to take the thread in your finger, get it to your elbow, and then get it back up to your finger. So you don't want it any longer than that. And that's where we're going to snip it off. And any longer than that, you'll be frustrated and you'll have knots and tears, and it's not a good day. I know from experience. Okay, another thing, some people use these fancy doohickeys, these little needle threaders. I don't use them. I find them even harder to work with. But I guess the idea is that you put this through the needle first and then the thread, and it somehow gets it through. I don't bother. So we'll just stick it through. Some people like to lick the end so that it stays nice and together there, because you don't want it to fray apart on you. And then you just pull it through. And when you get at the end, you want to take both of your ends there, and we have the needle hanging down in the middle. You want to just take them and tie a little bitty tiny knot in the end there. And maybe even another one just to make sure it's big enough there. Okay, and that should be great. So you essentially have a loop of thread now with your needle at one end and a knot at the other, and this will give you 2 threads going through each time, so it's kind of double the strength of what the machines that probably made your garment would have, so we're extra strong. And so once we've got it through, I just wanted to talk to you guys about the most common things that happen to your clothes. So I've often found that garments are really cheaply made, machine made, and usually what happens is the buttons aren't fastened as well as they probably could be, or the seams weren't sewn as well as they could have been. So usually what happens is your garment will unravel at a seam and you'll have like a little hole along a seam, or you'll lose a button. I have probably lost 10 or 15 buttons off my cardigans. It's an ongoing issue. And so we always have to get those guys back on there. So what we're gonna do today is I have a cardigan. This is gonna be nice because I'll do all my projects that I've been needing to do for a while. And so my cardigan has lost the button. And so we're going to need to put it back on. So I just found a white button in my button bin. You can get buttons at the thrift store or wherever you can find them. You can also sometimes, if you're lucky, your garment will have an extra button attached to the tag, and I always wondered what that was for. And that's, if you lose a button, you can take it off and use that. Sometimes if you have a garment with like a funky button that you wouldn't really be able to replace easily, that's what they do, which is very nice. This one does not, however. So I just found a white button. It'll do nicely. We're going to be fine with that. Okay, so let me see here. I want to make sure I don't forget any steps, so I have them all written down because I don't want to be guiding you guys into a mistake or something here. Okay, so the first thing, you will notice that your button is either a normal button, which is what you think of when you think of a button, and it looks kind of like this. It either has 2 or 4 holes and it's flat, or you will find yourself with a button that is kind of fancier like this, and it has no holes, and so if you turn it to the side, it just has kind of a loop, and so that way is a little bit different. You're basically just like looping the fabric through the button and the fabric over and over and over, and so that one's a lot easier. So that's called a shank button, and I guess this little loop down here is what they call the shank. So that's something that you might be dealing with. But for today, we're going to do a flat button, which is your standard button, I think. And okay, so you find the spot that you want your button to be, and I have some of the little leftover threads there so I can see exactly where I want to put it. And you go to the inside of your garment, so the inside of your sweater, and you poke your needle through right there, and you pull it up through to the outside of your garment. And now what you're going to do is you're going to take your button, you're going to make sure it's right side up, and you're just going to put it through one of those holes, and you're just going to slide it on down, and it should rest nicely where you want it to be.
You know, Kayla,
and then all you do is you take your
brownies or something, that you used to put a matchstick between the button and the surface of the garment so that you would have a little pretend shank when you finish doing your sewing. It would be, the shank would be made of the thread you used.
Yes, exactly. So that's what we'll do at the end. I don't put anything down quite yet. I try to keep my stitches pretty loose, and then at the end when we're done, we wrap our thread around and around above the fabric, and that makes a shank. But yes, I guess if you wanted to, you could definitely do that. That would help you from accidentally making your stitches too tight. That's a good point. Been there. Okay, so you would just go back down, and I do the hole across so that it kind of crosses around in the middle. I'll pull it through, and my nightmare is if I have some sort of awful bunch of threads today. So we'll hope that it treats me nicely. Okay, so then you've got your thread and needle back on the inside of your garment, and basically what you're doing is you're just poking it through the fabric and the button together, and you're going up and down, back and forth in all the holes. I like to do a crisscross pattern. You can do whatever makes your heart happy, and as long as we've got it secured nicely, it should be fine, and we've got something happening in all of the little holes there. So I'm just going to do that really quickly. Just make sure that when you're doing these stitches that you're not pulling too tightly. You don't want to yank it really hard because you're going to need a little bit of space when you're done. I'm trying so hard to make it so that you guys can see. And I would do, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 stitches in total, and then you should have it nice and secured there for you. Okay. Perfect. Okay. So you've done a few stitches, and now what you want to do, I am currently on the inside of my garment. I want to poke my thread up through just the fabric this time, not through the button as well. So I'm going to try and show that to you. So I'm going up in the fabric and I'm coming out just beside the button, not up through the button. And then, yeah, so what you want to do is you're making a shank, and I guess shank means that little bit of wiggle room for you to put your other piece of fabric in. So we need to give it some distance there. So what we're going to do is we're just going to take it and we're going to wrap the fabric around the button a few times. I would say 5 or 6 again. That just feels like a good number. Perfect. Okay. And then what I'm going to do, just make it up as I go. So you're gonna, once you've gotten your little shank there with the layers, then you want to take it and go back down from whence you came down through the fabric again. So, oh, so hard to show you guys. There we go. Back down. And then, so once we're back on the inside, you can tie a knot, and that's it. So we'll do a little knot, and just your standard knot. It's nothing fancy or complicated. And I'm gonna do 2 knots just to be extra careful. I'm gonna take my snips. I'm gonna snip it pretty short. There we go. Okay, so let's see the finished product. So there we go. Got ourselves a little button.
Very nice.
Feels pretty sturdy. I think we'll be okay. There we go. And now I can finally wear this to work again. Perfect.
So in terms of
yeah, so as I was saying,
repairs, Kayla, what other repairs do you find are the most common ones that you go through, especially as a mom with a young family? What do you find you have to repair the most?
Usually it's seams. I have a stuffed animal today that has had a seam busted. I have had a few decorative pillows that the kids played too hard with. The seam rips. And it's just because the thread is so flimsy. They're trying to make these things as cheaply as possible, and often it just breaks. And probably doesn't help that my children are rough on things, but that's how it goes. And then, yeah, the other thing would probably be, I mean, if your kid busted through the knee of their pants or their pajamas or something like that, that would be maybe like a patch job. That would be probably next level. And I'm not going to cover that today, but that's another thing that is an option for sure. You could patch up, or socks.
So where are we going next?
Okay, so we've done our buttons. The next thing, yeah, I'm gonna work on this stuffed animal here. So this is poor Rachel. Rachel's had a terrible accident and her back has ripped open. And my kids, I've had to hide her from the kids because they still want to play with Rachel, but we got to fix her first. So we'll get ourselves a fresh piece of thread. I am going to use a dark thread only to show you guys what I'm doing so that it stands out. Normally, it's a white stuffed animal, I would do a white thread, but just for today's purposes, we're gonna do a brown thread so that you guys can just see what's going on a little better, because otherwise I'm gonna be showing you and you're not gonna be able to see the difference, and that's not helpful at all. So, got my thread. I'm going to go down to my elbow and come back up. So we've got that good length of thread there. We're just going to the snips. So every time that I'm doing a new project, it's that same threading the needle process. So it's just that same little bit that I showed you guys at the beginning. Every single thing that we're doing today starts with that. So you can always go back and watch that if you want to. That little bit, but same thing. Okay, and I'm going to do a double knot again. because the kids will be playing with this. Should maybe do a quadruple knot. Okay, there we go. Awesome. And these are always fun because when you're done, no one would ever know that there was a rip. It just goes up so neatly and the seam ties up that you can do it really, really well and no one would ever know.
So
Today
you're
it's not
using
going to
a
look like that.
special
It's
type
like
of
contrasting.
stitch? Sorry, Kayla, are you
Yes,
using a
yeah.
special type of
And so this, yes. So this is called a ladder stitch. This is a little bit different from, I guess, what you would assume. I think most people assume you're going up and down like this. This is more of you have two seams and you're kind of doing rungs on a ladder to go back and forth up a seam so that the seam can be closed like that. So what we're going to do, okay. So for a stuffed animal, it's a little bit tricky because you have to come from the inside and it can be a little bit of a tight space. So what we're gonna do, this is Rachel's back here, and we're going to pick one side of her rip and I'm going to go from the inside and come out so that that knot is inside. You don't want the knot to be poking out on the outside of the fabric. So let's try and do this so you guys can see. There we go. So that knot should be inside so that you can't see it. And then what we're going to do is we're going to, I've got it in this side. I'm going to come across to this side and we're going to tuck the needle into the fabric or the stuffed animal at this point for about 1/2 centimeter and poke it back out. I gotta try and do this nicely. There we go. There we go. Okay. And so you just go back and forth like that, making rungs on a ladder. Sorry, it's just easier for me to do it this way before I show you guys. And I'm not going to tighten my stitches at this point. I'm just going to leave them so that you guys can see them and we'll tighten them in a second here. My kids will be so happy that Rachel will be back in business here. I tried to bring her out this morning and all hell broke loose because Rachel couldn't be played with. Oh, so funny. Okay. So this is what we've done, and I've gone back and forth, just rungs in a ladder, and then magically when I pull this, ooh, she just neatly zips up there. I know, so magical, and you really can't tell there at all. It's really neat. Of course, she's a stuffed animal, so she has fur to kind of help cover it up, but even on like cotton or other things, it really works well to do a really neat job. So to end this, there's a little bit of a predicament because my thread's on the outside, but I don't want a knot on the outside. So this is where it's a little bit of a trick, and I want to make sure I do this right for you guys. Okay. So you do one more stitch and you go from, let me see, the outside to the inside so that you're not, or so that your thread is on the inside of that stuffed animal, and it's really tricky. Just like that. And then you tie a knot I need to do this correctly for you. Okay, so you tie a knot. And then I'm gonna poke the needle back into Rachel, poor Rachel, and gonna come out the other side of Rachel. And then, so I've basically just stabbed right through her, and I just have the thread coming out at a random spot. And then I have that knot now tucked inside, and then I just pull really tight. This is gonna look really terrible to children. What am I doing to this poor little sheep here? Pull really tight, snip that, and then the thread falls back in. So you've got that excess thread sitting nicely inside Rachel, and we can't see it anymore. So that's that little trick. And yeah, she's all better now. So that's
great.
And you can do the same.
Healthier.
Yeah. Yes, much better. We'll send her off to the recovery room. You can do this with pillows, clothes, anything where you have two pieces that you need to get back together. If you have an enormous rip or a tiny little rip, it doesn't matter. You just do the same thing. And I would say you want the rungs about 1/2 centimeter apart, no matter what you're working on, just so that when you pull it, it's pretty neat. You don't have bunches and things like that. So that's a bit of a tricky one, but it's not too bad. You got to practice on it. And then those are kind of our repairs. So I guess next would be alterations.
What have you got for us?
So altering your clothes is different from repairing them, because repairing, you're just restoring it to what it was. Altering, you're going to be changing the shape. So that's a different ball game. So often what it'll be is you'll have a garment that's too big. You can't really work with one that's too small. You could add fabric, but that's a headache and it's much more advanced. So usually you start with something that's too big, and you're either taking in a waistband to work to get it to be smaller this way, or you're hemming it to get it to be shorter. Taking in a waistband would be similar to what we just did, where you would pinch. I'll kind of show you here. This is my husband's pants. He's gonna be thrilled. And so for a waistband, he doesn't know. For a waistband, if you wanted to take it, you would pinch, and then you would do that ladder across there that we just did. And you would, I'm not going to do it today because it's a little bit involved, but you would want to do that along a seam, and it would be similar to the ladder stitch that we just did. The other thing that is probably the most common problem are pants. So my husband has a really hard time finding pants the right length. He's just a little bit shorter than what the standard lengths are. So I'm often hemming his pants. You can also do this to a skirt too. It's the same principle. It's just one hem instead of two, I guess. And so I'm gonna go through hemming with you today. And I'm not going to spend the time to actually hand sew an entire hem in front of you. I will bore you to tears, but I'll just kind of walk you through what you would do as much as I can. So for a job like this, we're going to need a few more supplies. So we're going to need some scissors, as I said, needle and thread, and then you're going to want a white pencil crayon or a chalk marker. Since I do this a lot, I have this. It's a fancy little gadget that has chalk inside it, and it wipes off the garment really nicely. So you can get that at Michael's or craft stores, things like that. But you can easily use a white pencil crayon, or if you're working on white pants, then you could use a dark pencil crayon or whatever you want to use for that. And then another thing you'll want is some sort of measuring tape or a ruler. I lost my ruler, so we're using a measuring tape right now. Oh, and some pins as well. So I'll just show you those little pins, and then I think that's all that we'll need for hemming. So what you would do is I would put these pants on my husband, and I would get him to stand up with shoes on that he's planning on wearing with it. That's important. And then you would roll the hem up so that it just falls nicely to the floor. So usually his kind of bunch at the floor because they're too long. So what I will do is at the bottom, I will, if it's like this, I would just fold it up to where it just sets nicely on the ground without dragging or bunching with his shoes on. And so that's where we would start, and that's where I would say, okay, that's the desired length of the pants that we want to get to. So for this, and you want to err on the side of caution of being too long. The worst part is if you hem the pants too short and then there's nothing really you can do. You just have clam diggers at that point or capris. So you want to kind of err on the side of caution and do them extra long. You can always take out your stitches and make it a little bit shorter because you'll have that extra fabric to do that. So what I'm going to do is put it to where we had it here. So when I did try these on him, we did, it was to this point, and I drew a little mark to remember that, and then I measured it. So it came out to be 8 centimeters from the existing hem. So I know that all around I'm going to want to make a mark 8 centimeters. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip the pants inside out, because you will learn that while you're sewing, you kind of want to be working on things inside out, behind the scenes, so that when you're done, you can flip them out and they look lovely. There we go, sorry, a little bit of. Okay, so I have it nice and flat. I'll lay it on a table, and what I did was that 8 centimeters that I wanted to get to, I measured all around and I marked it with my white pencil crayon. So kind of hard to show you guys up with this, but I would take it, and at the 8 I would do a little mark, and I would go all around 8 centimeters so that I know exactly how long I want it. And then what you want to do is you don't want to chop it at 8 centimeters because you need extra fabric to roll up to make a nice hem. You don't want what they call a raw edge, which is where you just snip your fabric and then it will unravel on you. That's awful and it will look terrible. So don't do that. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to go 3 centimeters closer to the existing hem, which would take me to 5 centimeters from the hem. So I've got one line at 8 centimeters, that's where I want it to be, and then another line at 5 centimeters. 5 centimeters will be where I cut, and that gives me 3 centimeters of fabric to work. And I can fold that up and sew it in so that you don't have that fraying edge. That's our goal. So at this point, you would draw your edge all around and you would just cut the pants. And I know it's always frightening to just take a pair of scissors to pants, but I promise it'll be okay. So you would cut it at that longest line. Don't cut it the top line, cut it the lowest line there. So you would cut there, and I'm just going to do that super quick. My poor husband. Well, I guess you know what? This will be good because then they'll finally be the right length. They've been sitting in the back of the closet, so it'll be a good surprise. Okay, so we've chopped off the bottom there, and this is what I have. So I still have that line running along at 3 centimeters, or it would be 8 centimeters, I guess. So that's where the pants are going to end when we're all said and done. Another thing I forgot to mention, with pants like this, if you have an iron, it really helps when you're folding things to keep everything. You don't have to pin so much if everything is nice and ironed. So if you want, you can have an iron, and every time you fold, you can iron. That's what I would normally do. Right now I don't have time, and just to show you guys, we won't need to do that. But that can make it a lot easier. So, okay, so we have it inside out. Excuse me. And so what we would do is fold it once at 1.5 centimeters and fold it again at 1.5 centimeters. So that adds up to those 3 centimeters that we have. Now the reason that you don't want to just fold it up once is because if I fold it once, I still have a raw edge, so it'll still be fraying. It'll be fraying inside its pant leg, but it'll still be fraying. So we want to fold once and then fold twice, and that way you have no raw edges anywhere to be seen. They're all tucked up, and that way it has nowhere to fray to, and that's what we want at the end of the day, and it looks the nicest. That's how the professionals do it. So yeah, and for time I won't be able to actually hem this, but we'll just pretend. So you would get your needle and thread that you would have that we did earlier, same deal, and we've got it all ready. And so you would just, and you would have this ironed and pressed with the folds nicely, and maybe even pinned if you wanted to be really, really precise, which is what you want to do. And then we would start to sew. So for this one, it's a different stitch. It's called a whip stitch, and it is the easiest stitch in sewing, and you just go back and forth. So that's the one that people think of when they think of sewing. You're just going in and out and in and out, and that's all there is to it. So you would just go in and out of those 2 layers of fabric, up and down, and you want to keep checking what will be the outside of your pant leg, and just make sure that there's no bumps or knots or tangles or anything, because you want that to look really neat when you're done. So every time you do your stitch, just kind of glance at like what'll be the outside of the pant leg. Make sure that the stitches are neat. The inside doesn't matter so much, it's going to be inside your pant leg. Once you've gone around the entire pant leg, you want to insert your needle into what'll be the inside of the pant leg and make a knot on that side. Just make sure you don't do your knot on the outside of the pant leg. That would be terrible. And then you can cut your thread, and that's all. I say that's all. It's a little bit tricky to figure out, but once you've got it, it's not too bad, and you'll be so proud of what you've done. You can do all kinds of pants and things at that point. So another tip I have just for this to finish off is when you're doing the other leg, you want to just go by the measurement of the first leg. You don't want to measure specifically to, like, for example, my husband's feet, because it would make pants that have one leg possibly longer than the other, depending on the way he might be standing at the moment or whatever. So you want to make sure that you measure the pant leg while it's laying flat on a table, and make sure that you're doing it the exact same. You want the pant legs to be the same, ideally.
So
I mean, maybe not, maybe you could.
You measure the pants, not the person.
Yes, when you're doing that second leg. So the first leg, measure the person. The second one, you just want those pant legs to be matching.
Fair enough.
And that would be it for hemming. Unfortunately, this was kind of a whirlwind of stuff, so hopefully when this is up on YouTube, you can feel free to go back, replay, pause, and then, yeah, that's kind of the basics. And from here, yeah, you can go on to hand quilting, which is a fantastic hobby, cross stitching, embroidery. You can make your own clothes. There's a lot of fun things that I have learned kind of just on my own from Googling and from consulting books. I know the West Grey Public Library has some excellent resources on, we have some really great books with these beautiful color step-by-step pictures for teaching you how to like knit and crochet and embroider and cross stitch. And yeah, there are a few books at the library that are fantastic for that.
Great.
to help get you started and consult.
That's great, Kayla. Thank you so much. That's been a terrific primer for people, I think. And maybe we'll bring you back to the hand quilting and see what we can do there too. But thanks for all these insights. As you say, it's a lot in a very short time. So people can go to the Public Library's YouTube channel and replay it as often as they want. Great. Thank you so much, Kayla. We'll say goodbye for now.
Thank you.
We'll see you at the library.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Bye-bye.